Julian Nagelsmann has put his name forward to be in the mix for the next Manchester United head coach job. Michael Carrick's now suggesting United could be targeting a left winger this summer. We've got the usual daily midfield shortlist updates, and United are also being linked to an excited right back at a big price, plus all the latest news, keeping you right up to date with everything. Let's get into it. So, big game tonight. I'm sure we were all devastated and disappointed from last night's result with Wolves beating Liverpool. That was absolutely tragic, wasn't it? I haven't been laughing too hard about that with a few friends and colleagues that are Liverpool fans today. Not much banter going around. But big game for us tonight. It can an opportunity to open up some breathing space in the race for Champions League football, which is what we want, just to make the rest of the season a little bit less nervy, because it's so important for us financially and heading into the summer where we're being told we need obviously the financial rewards of that, but then player recruitment. We need this overhaul and this rebuild, and the finances that come from that are going to be absolutely huge for us. But a little bit of injury news. Chris Wheeler saying that Harry Maguire has recovered from his illness and is due to be in the United squad to face Newcastle at St James's Park tonight. So that's massive. Still no update at the time recording on Luke Shaw, because Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire both had an illness. It wasn't an injury, which is why there were question marks whether they would be available ahead of the big game tonight. But Harry Maguire in the squad, and that's huge. At left back, Mazraoui did a good job when he came on. I'm not dead against Mazraoui playing it. Not ideal, but Luke Shaw's performances have been a little bit iffy at left back recently as well. So actually having Mazraoui there is not the end of the world. But missing Maguire tonight would have been huge. So thankfully he's recovered from that illness and should be available for tonight's game. Massive game. I'm nervous about it. I just want to see better performance than what we have seen recently. But I think, to be fair, Newcastle are going to be a little bit more expansive than the teams that we've just faced, which might suit us a little bit more. But we can hope, and I just pray that we get the 3 points for tonight. But yeah, Harry Maguire available. Right, let's kick off with the manager news then. So, Team Talk understands Nagelsmann has now turned his attention to the vacant United hot seat, and intermediaries have put his name into the mix, name to the club, making sure it is in the mix. So Graham Bailey is suggesting that Julian Nagelsmann's camp agents, however we're defining intermediaries nowadays, seem to be the buzzword going around, doesn't it? Has put his name into the mix to become to be at least in contention to become the next Manchester United manager or head coach, or however we're describing it. It's the same thing, isn't it? Now, that's really interesting because Nagelsmann's a really interesting name. Young manager, but experienced. I think that would have Christopher Vivell's fingerprints over it from their time at the Red Bull Group. So if there is any truth, I would imagine that maybe that's something to do with that. Although there were reports recently suggesting that Nagelsmann does have admirers at the club. Ticks a lot of the boxes on the pitch, though. Modern football, aggressive, pressing, good structure. As I mentioned, young but experienced for a coach. He was at Hoffenheim, Leipzig, Bayern, and now manager at Germany. So, really, really interesting profile, interesting manager, can work under the conditions I think that Ineos are driving towards in terms of a head coach, not a manager, so less involvement in terms of recruitment and so on. I wouldn't be against going, if it's not going to be, like Carrick, then I wouldn't be against going for Nagelsmann. I think he's a really interesting profile of manager, plays a decent brand of football and so on. The only box he doesn't tick, though, is the Premier League experience one, which is a bit of a concern. But he's been at a big club, hopefully can handle the pressure. Seems a little bit crazy as well. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but in the mix. So Nagelsmann apparently has come forward, put himself in the mix for the manager position. Now, that's how it's been aggregated. I've actually read the report, though, because the article has actually got a couple of other interesting bits as well. So it also says, joining him on the list of admirers is 54-year-old Kovac, the former Croatia international who has managed Bayern Munich and is currently steering Borussia Dortmund as potentially another name to add to the list of potential manager targets or head coach targets, which seems to be dwindling down, with Tuchel staying at England, Ancelotti staying at Brazil by all accounts, Enrique potentially wanting to stay at PSG, although there's not really been any firm noise regarding that. The other thing that United are looking for, though, is Premier League experience, and Kovac doesn't have, like Nagelsmann, doesn't have that Premier League experience. Kovac's not a manager, though, that I've ever really looked into or thought too much about. So get involved in the comments if you think that would be a good shout or not. But in the same report, it says, despite the intrigue surrounding both German ball managers, Old Trafford power brokers are believed to still be prioritising candidates versed in the unique demands of the Premier League. So even though they are interesting names and maybe ones that we still would look at and interview and all of that stuff, they are still wanting somebody with Premier League experience, which I think, out of the Premier League experienced managers that we've been linked with anyway, and there might be others, but the main ones is Silva, Glasner, and Areola. And being completely truthful at this point in time, I'd probably prefer just to keep Michael Carrick than go for those. I don't see anything different from what those managers are doing to what Michael Carrick's doing. And I think if you get better players, then I don't see why we wouldn't just keep Michael Carrick if he continues doing what he's doing and saying what he's saying and bits like that. And actually, Graham Bailey says that in the report, given his form, United have shown since Carrick took charge, not to mention his unique handling of the players, affable demeanour in the media, and a personality which is the polar opposite of Amrim, has seen Carrick placed firmly in control of the race. And he did say in his press conference in the embargo section that he loves being here. This is the dream job, and so on and so forth. So he's talking everything, talking himself, I think, into contention. It's just whether the club are going to go down that route. And I don't mind the club, looking at other options. That's the right thing to do, in my opinion. Do their due diligence, interview, look at play styles and style of play, fit within the club, fit within the players that we've got, the ones that we want to recruit as well. Who is going to be the best manager? Can you handle the pressure? Can you handle the media? All of these questions. Do your interviewing, and if Michael Carrick is in contention and he's interviewed, then that's all we can hope for. But if he continues winning games and the performances are pick up and bits until the end of the season, then there's absolutely no reason why Carrick, in my opinion anyway, like I would take Carrick ahead of the Premier League experience one. And Nagelsmann would be interesting. I'm not sure which way I would side regarding that. I'd probably, to be fair, as long as the results keep going the way that they are, I'd probably still be inclined to stay with Carrick. But yeah, we'll wait and see what the club decide to do. So interesting names there. That's the latest regarding the head coach. But sticking with Michael Carrick, in his embargo press conference, he was asked directly if United would be in the market for a left winger in the summer. And he said, it's a point to consider. Definitely, I think Mateus Cunha can play in that position. Ahmed can do it too, but adding a left winger is a possibility. Yes, and then he went on to explain about squad balance and, having rotation options and bits like that in his press conference. And, that's good. It is an area of concern. We know we went for Semenyo. We would clearly, I think, would have been for that left wing position with us having Ahmed and Mbumo that can play on the right. Semenyo on the left. I think it would have been Cunha and Sesko fighting for the striker position under Ruben Amorim. So there's clearly an appetite to go for a left winger, which is interesting because there's the narrative has been, are we going to go for a left back or a left winger? Maybe there's an argument to say we would need both, but if we get a left winger and then Patrick Dorgu becomes your left back, that all of a sudden means you've got a super attacking, athletic left-hand side of the pitch, which is a glaringly obvious. The more games we're playing, the more it is obvious that we do need somebody down that side of the pitch, and we are that hole has been created by Patrick Dorgu being injured because he was doing a fantastic job down that side for Michael Carrick's first couple of games before the injury. In terms of names, Simon Stone in the BBC said for the summer window, United are linked with the Andy Amandi £70 million valuation and have been loosely connected to Anthony Gordon, although firm interest is unconfirmed. Priority lies with signing at least one, possibly two central midfielders, given Casemiro's exit and Manuel Ugati's minimal role under the current management. And Fabrizio Romano the other day did effectively say that Manuel Ugati is more likely to leave in the summer. So that means I think we need three midfielders. I think we're one down anyway with the change in formation, with Bruno now being played in his position in the 10. So we are one midfielder light. And then if Casemiro and Ugati go, we need to replace those. So I think we need three midfielders. Left winger, Yan Diomande is the standout name. And as Simon Stone said there, Simon Stone's connected at the club. So this is a decent source, loosely connected to Anthony Gordon, though it's unconfirmed the interest there. So, but yeah, going to be interesting. I mean, Diomande and Dorgu down the left-hand side would be really interesting to watch. I think that would be absolutely frightening for teams to try and play against. Pace, power, athleticism, trickery in Diomande, like his dribbling skills look absolutely absolutely topped, and that would be really interesting to see. That would definitely, I think, fix the left hand side. Just going to be expensive, isn't it? And then the other story regarding the left wing coming from James Ducker in the Telegraph, pretty much saying a similar thing. So United's transfer priority will be to sign a defensive midfielder to fill the void left by Casemiro, who's leaving at the end of the season. With doubts over the future of Malawi, there could even be a couple of arrivals in the middle of the pitch. The centre-back situation is also likely to need exploring with Harry Maguire out of contract. I'm going to come back to that in a second, in June, and yet to agree a new deal. But recruiting a left wing is expected to form part of their thinking. So left winger, midfield we know about anyway. And then potentially centre back. Now that's interesting because the centre back position is actually starting to become a little bit of a worry as well. Midfield we know about, maybe left winger, full back I think would be an area to look at as well, and centre back because Harry Maguire is not he's no spring chicken anymore. Starting to pick up niggles and knocks, and not necessarily long term injuries, but missing for a few weeks and then back, and that's worrying. Martinez out now. So his injury record is a concern. De Ligt's been missing for months with a bad back. That is a massive concern. And then you've got Hebben and Yoro, who are two fantastic defenders, but they are young and inexperienced, and I don't think quite ready to form a partnership just yet. I think they still need a few more years of development with some experience in front of them. So all of a sudden, the centre-back position is starting to become a little bit alarming. My brother-in-law was saying that the other day, actually, about the centre-back position. I think he's right. Regarding that potentially needing some attention, but whether we're going to have the funds and the budget and the time and all of that stuff. But yeah, give us your thoughts on all of that. Now, sticking with the midfield, let's go through the daily midfield news. So United are continuing to monitor Tyler Adams' situation at Bournemouth after the US international returned to action following a serious knee injury sustained at Old Trafford in December. At around £40 million, Adams would be a cheaper option than some of the other midfield targets being considered by United, including Elliot Anderson, Carlos Baleba, and Adam Wharton. So that came from Chris Wheeler. And I think Chris Wheeler was the journalist that originally linked us with a move for Tyler Adams. Can't remember if it was him or Ben Jacobs. Interesting profile. Could potentially be the third choice or the Ugarte replacement. I wouldn't necessarily be against doing that. £40 million. I mean, if you sold Ugarte, what would he be worth? 20 to 30 million, maybe. If you can get that, and then Tyler Adams, I wouldn't be against that. I wouldn't be going for Tyler Adams as our number one Casemiro replacement, but as an Ugarte replacement or as that third midfielder to bring in, then he's a decent shout. He can do a good job. Red flag though about his injury. He has had bad injuries over the last couple of years. So, but yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. Would be a cheaper alternative anyway than some of the other names that we've been linked with. Now, another player who would be a cheaper alternative is João Gomez, who I mentioned in the news the other day. So Manchester United and Napoli are reportedly interested in João Gomez from Wolves ahead of the summer window. Now, that came from Nico, who's a little bit hit and miss. So we'll pay attention to this one, but there has been long links like Chris Wheeler, and they've sort of linked us with João Gomez. I don't know why we didn't make a move in January, but it is what it is. Maybe they were hoping on the fact that Wolves do get relegated and he would be available cheaper, and as long as we get Champions League football, that's a gamble that's paid off at the end of the day, and maybe saved a few £1 million, which you can hopefully put towards other signings. But João Gomez, definitely an interesting player, and again, is your second or third choice like midfielder to come in that would be relatively cheap. I would be all over going for João Gomez. I think he's got a good profile and can do a good job as a rotation option in midfield, and cheap as well. Now, the sticking with the midfield, Alex Crook said that Manchester United are planning a serious assault on the transfer market this summer with players such as Baleba, Wharton, Anderson, Mateus Fernandes, and Tonali all in their sights. Now, there's been a few reports going around recently about Mateus Fernandes, but a lot of it has been opinion pieces. So, from the Manchester Evening News, I think we're saying that should West Ham get relegated, then maybe United would look towards somebody like Mateus Fernandes. So that's the first journalist I've actually seen linking us directly with Mateus Fernandes, along with the usual suspects on there. I'm sure, I'm sure you're going to be shocked to read the names of Baleba, Wharton, Anderson, and Tonali on there. We've only been talking about, 3 of those for the last 6 months consistently, and Tonali for the last 2 consistently as well. But Mateus Fernandes would be an interesting shout. Young, could be one of those cheaper opportunity signings if West Ham do get relegated, along with João Gomez at Wolves. And I do think we need to pay attention to the opportunities that present themselves in the summer market with team situation. Obviously, West Ham would need the money. Probably be a little bit more expensive though, because I think they paid £42 million for him, so he's going to be a little bit more than that, even if they do get relegated, just so they don't take a book loss on him. And then also been another, and this was the opinion piece from the Manchester Evening News. It said United could explore a cut price midfield deal if West Ham are relegated. Potential fire sale in East London may open the door with Portuguese midfielder Mateus Fernandes emerging as a possible option for Old Trafford as they look to replace the outgoing Casemiro. So that's, again, an interesting profile. I mentioned this the other day, though. The reality is, I think with the midfield, there's loads of names that I think would do a good job. When we'll all have our preferences of, who's the top target and all of this stuff. But the reality is, we're a midfielder down. So even if you've got Adams or if you've got Fernandes, we're in a better position than what we are now because we're effectively a midfielder. I think all of the names linked to probably do a better job than Ugarte in midfield. And then it's just about prioritising who is going to be your main name. And I think the club are going to go for an expensive signing. I think they're going to go all in for Elliot Anderson. If we don't get him, then maybe it would be Carlos Baleba or somebody else, or maybe Tonali, and then potentially supplement the squad depth with cheaper options like a João Gomez or like a Tyler Adams or something. That's what I could potentially see the club wanting to do. And then you've got money to then concentrate on a top left winger because wingers are going to be expensive. And then maybe, look at the fullback position or look at the centre half position. Going with fullbacks though, interesting name link. So this comes from Fraser Fletcher saying that Brentford star Michael Kayode is becoming one of Europe's most sought after young defenders, with Manchester City joined by Manchester United and other elite rivals in the race for his signature. Coyote's dynamic style, combining pace, physicality and an exceptional long throw, which has become a potent weapon in Brentford, has drawn widespread admiration. His consistent performances in a competitive league have seen his market value soar, with club sources revealing he's valued in excess of £60 million. And we know how difficult it would be to get a player from Brentford, but good option. Pace, power, athleticism, I think would be a decent shout. I do think maybe getting somebody a little bit younger, if you are going to keep Dallo and give him some competition, or if you're going to keep Mazraoui there, I think Mazraoui, can do a job either on the left or on the right. I think Kayode would be a really interesting profile to bring in. Ticks all the boxes, as I mentioned. Good athleticism, young, developmental Premier League experience. £60 million though is a massive outlay, which is maybe where getting one of those cheaper midfield options comes into play, because if you can save a few million there, you can then put it towards maybe someone that's going to be a little bit more expensive. Not the first time we've been linked with Kayode either. I think there's been a couple of rumours. I think one was suggesting that we were scouting him and looking at him as well, but it's going to be a difficult deal to do, especially if Man City are sniffing around, and especially getting a player out of Brentford. We saw how difficult that was in the summer, and if they value him at 60 million, that's going to be a challenge. And Brentford would want competition as well, as we saw with Mbeumo, where they can try and drive the price up, which is ultimately what ended up slowing down that particular deal. But interesting profile. Give us your thoughts. Kayode, good option, bad shout? I think would be a decent option to bring in and create some competition down the right back, in the right back area. But yeah, get involved. Let me know what you think regarding that. And then we're going to go through, let's go through a little bit of exit talk. So this come out from Court Offside saying Mason Mount's time at Manchester United is yet to unfold as many anticipated. I would say the same. Should the club pursue new additions, Mount's position could become increasingly uncertain. Aston Villa have emerged as a potential suitor, with Unai Emery reportedly keen on adding depth to his midfield. So that was a report coming from Court Offside. Effectively, it was saying that, look, Mount's not lived up to his expectation at United with his injuries and everything like that, which is completely true. Plus the fact that we would be looking to bring in like more wingers, and then maybe Cunha becomes your 10, or can rotate with Bruno in that particular area. That then forces Mount down the pecking order, and that Aston Villa potentially would be a suitor looking for Mason Mount. However, there's been another report coming from Peter O'Rourke saying that Manchester United have no intention of selling midfielder Mason Mount in this summer's transfer window. Aston Villa and Fulham were both chasing a deal for Mount, but sources have said that it will be difficult for either club to sign him this summer. It did say in the report that United would want like a big fee, and he's on big wages as well. I think that's going to be the problem with Mount, and this is the legacy problem at United, is the fact that we've given out these big contracts, and I get the clamour and I see it, and around the fact that United have reduced their wage bill and now having a salary cap at the club. And this is the reason why, because of players like Mason Mount and players as we've seen that we struggled to sell last season, where we had to loan out Rashford, like why Sancho on loan at Aston Villa and why haven't we just sold him? It's his wages is the problem. You know, we're going to have difficulty, I think, in the summer potentially with Onana, that we want to move on because of his high wages. And that is the problem when you give out the big contracts to players when you've just signed them, that you just don't know whether they're going to fit, whether they're going to make it, whether they're not going to make it. And that is a problem that we need to address. If in future, I've said this before, if Mbeumo in 2 years' time is smashing in the goals and, you know, is one of our best players and he comes knocking on the door and says, yeah, I think I deserve a pay rise. Cool, fine with that. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay players, you know, value or higher wages if they've earned it. It's just as a new signing, because there's so many unknown factors. Yeah, cap it. See how they get on, and if in 2 years' time, once they've signed, they're doing well, yeah, give them a bit of a pay rise. No issues with that. It's just, and that's the legacy problem at United. So that's why players like Mount, even though a majority of you going off of comments from previous videos would want to sell Mason Mount, the reality is he's on like 250 grand a week. Who's going to sign him for that? Who's going to give him that? And is he going to want to take a pay cut to go somewhere else? I don't know. I don't know, and that's going to be the problem, isn't it? But we'll keep an eye on it and see how it all plays out in the summer. But give us your thoughts on that in the comments below. That'd be interesting to hear what you think regarding that. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video, because that's you all up to date with the latest news and transfer updates. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out, hype the video, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next one.